Oh, March in the garden. It's that time when everything's sort of waking up,
No
so
crap.
much new growth, all that deliciousness to come. But,
Yeah, but it's not just the good stuff,
oh,
right?
you're right. You're totally right. I mean, all those early season pests, they start making an appearance too.
Exactly. And the tricky thing is they often get a bit of a head start before those beneficial insects. The ones that usually keep them in check. It's like
They're out there partying, and we haven't even set the table yet.
exactly. And that's why, March is just so crucial for being proactive in the garden. I mean, I don't know about you, but uh
Oh, I've learned my lesson, let me tell you. Just last year, I had this beautiful, like, row of baby broccoli plants
mhm.
just thriving.
Sure.
And I swear, literally overnight, they vanished. Just
Mhm.
gone. Cutworms decimated them.
Ah, cutworms, they're
The
sneaky.
worst. And then it wasn't long after that, my broad beans were just covered. I mean, seriously, it looked like an aphid
Yeah.
convention. It was a disaster. But it
Yeah.
was a real wake-up call for me about being vigilant early on. So for this deep dive,
We're going to be all over this.
we've gathered a ton of great information on how to tackle those early invaders, organically, of course. We want to equip you with a arsenal of natural weapons.
Think of it as your guide to peaceful pest control in March.
I like that.
Mhm.
So we're going to be focusing on the main culprits that tend to show up early. Aphids, those tiny sapsuckers, flea beetles, those jumpy leaf munchers, cutworms, the shadowy seedling assassins, and, oh, let's not forget the carrot rust fly doing its dirty work underground where we can't even see it. And
I can't leave out the slugs, those slimy nighttime nibblers.
oh, the slugs,
Ah,
yes. They're always a joy. But seriously, the main takeaway from everything we've been looking at is that prevention is key. I mean, it's so much easier to stop these problems before they even start than to try and fix them later, right?
100%. We'll be exploring a bunch of organic strategies, simple DIY sprays, really emphasizing how to create a garden that's naturally more resistant to pests.
So let's dive right in. Let's start with those aphids. I mean, they just seem to appear out of nowhere. One day your plant is perfectly fine, and the next, it's like a tiny green party exploded on it.
One thing that really struck me when we were researching this is just how incredibly quickly aphids can multiply. I mean, a small group can become a major infestation in just a few days.
Really?
That quickly. Oh, yeah. And that's why, catching those early signs is so important. Even just a few aphids missed early on, it can turn into a real problem very quickly.
Wow, okay. I'm taking notes. So what should we be looking out for? I mean, how do we know that aphids have moved in?
Well, one of the first things you might notice is this kind of sticky residue on the leaves. It's called honeydew. It's basically like sugary droplets that aphids leave behind.
So it's like they're having a picnic and not cleaning up after themselves.
Kind of. And you might also see that the leaves are starting to curl up a bit or look a little deformed, especially on new growth.
Oh, okay, like they're getting all puckered and distorted.
Yeah, exactly. Roses, kale, peppers, those are some of their favorites early on.
Okay, so let's say we've spotted some of these signs. What do we do?
Well, the first thing really is consistent monitoring. Our resources are pretty clear about this. Check your plants at least once a week, and even more often after it rains. Because aphids, they really love those young, tender shoots.
Right, so the equivalent of a nice juicy steak for an aphid.
Exactly. Now, in terms of getting them under control, there are a few different organic methods that work really well. Neem oil is a good option, especially if you've got a heavy infestation. It kind of disrupts their feeding cycle.
Okay, neem oil. So we've got that one in our arsenal for when things get a bit out of control.
Hmm.
But what about when we just see a few?
So for smaller populations, or if you're just looking for more of a preventative measure, ladybugs are amazing. Seriously, one ladybug can eat something like 50 aphids a day.
Wow, no way.
I know, and you can actually order them online. Just release them into your garden in the evening.
Oh, that's cool. Like a tiny army of aphid assassins.
Precisely.
I love it.
Yes.
Okay, so now garlic spray. I've heard a lot about using garlic spray for pests. Does that actually work for aphids too?
Yeah, it's particularly good for those early stage infestations. The smell really deters them. There's a super simple recipe, just one minced garlic clove mixed with a quart of water, and you spray that on your plants at dawn.
Okay, so garlic spray at dawn. Got it.
And honestly, if you just spot a few aphids here and there, sometimes even a good blast of water from the hose is enough.
Really?
Yeah, just to knock them off and disrupt them.
I like that. Simple and effective. So I know one of our resources talked about a kind of go-to routine for dealing with aphids.
Yeah.
What do they suggest?
They recommended a combination of those methods we just discussed. So, starting with the garlic spray at dawn as a deterrent, releasing those ladybugs in the evening so they can get to work overnight, and then using neem oil every 5 days or so if the problem persists.
Okay, but just to be clear, we we should avoid spraying anything when the plants are flowering, right?
Yeah,
To protect the bees.
absolutely. We want to be mindful of those pollinators, so yeah, no spraying during flowering time.
Perfect. Now, how do we stop those aphids from showing up in the first place? What are some good prevention strategies?
So, attracting beneficial insects is a huge one. Things like lacewings, they love aphids, and you can attract them by planting things like dill or yarrow.
Okay, dill and yarrow. So making the garden more enticing to the good guys.
Exactly. And also, try to avoid over-fertilizing with those nitrogen-rich fertilizers because, aphids, they love that lush, fast
So
growth.
it's almost like we're spoiling them with a buffet.
Exactly. Instead, use a slow-release compost to feed your plants.
Okay, so it's about building a more balanced ecosystem
100%.
where the plants are strong and there are plenty of aphid predators around.
Yes,
One thing I've always heard is that aphids only attack weak plants. Is that true?
that's a myth. It's not true at all. While stressed plants can be a bit more vulnerable, aphids will happily attack perfectly healthy plants too.
Wow, so there's really no excuse. We have to be on our guard.
Vigilance is key.
Mm.
Okay, so let's move on to those tiny terrors, the flea beetles. They're so quick, and they leave those telltale tiny holes, almost like buckshot, on the leaves.
Yeah, it's pretty distinctive.
It is. And you know what's fascinating about flea beetles? Their jumping ability. They can leap huge distances relative to their size. I mean, it's really incredible.
So that makes them extra tricky to deal with.
It does. And they can cause a lot of damage, especially to young seedlings.
And if I remember correctly, eggplants and radishes, they're particularly vulnerable.
You got it. And flea beetles, they're a big problem in early spring because that's when those seedlings are so small and tender, and they tend to be most active on those warm, sunny afternoons.
Ah, so they're sunbathers as well as leaf munchers.
Exactly. So let's say you've spotted those telltale holes. What can we do to stop them?
Yeah, what's the plan of attack?
So one organic option that worked really well is kaolin clay. You basically dust the leaves with it, and it creates this kind of barrier that flea beetles don't like.
So it's like giving your plants a suit of armor.
Yeah, I like that. And then there's trap cropping. Planting radishes nearby can actually lure the flea beetles away from the plants you're trying to protect.
Ooh, clever. So it's like a decoy.
Exactly. And for even more protection, row covers are fantastic. If you put them on right when you plant, they create a physical barrier so the beetles can't even get to the plants.
Okay, row covers.
Got it. And just like with aphids, a Reckley spray of garlic can also help deter them.
Okay, so we've got our kaolin clay, our decoy radishes, and our garlic spray. Anything else?
Well, overall, the recommended strategy is to really try to preempt those flea beetles with the row covers right from the start. Then distract them with those radish trap crops and, spray the leaves with that kaolin clay and water mixture.
Multi-layered defense. I like it.
Layered defense, absolutely. Now, for prevention, keeping your soil healthy is always a good thing. Strong, healthy plants are just better equipped to tolerate pest damage.
Makes sense, so they can fight back a little better.
Exactly. And staggering your planting times can also help to avoid those peak periods of flea beetle activity.
Right, so don't put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. Okay, so moving on to those stealthy little ninjas, the cutworms. I still shudder thinking about finding my tomato seedlings just lying there, severed at the base.
It's heartbreaking.
Oh, it is. I mean, they're just brutal. So tomatoes, cabbage, kale, they seem to be their favorites. What should we be looking for? Are there any early warning signs apart from finding a seedling lying flat on its face?
Honestly, the first sign is often the damage itself, which is so frustrating. But if you're really observant, going out at dusk with a flashlight, you might actually catch them in the act.
Oh, like a cutworm stakeout.
Exactly. Now, when it comes to defense, cardboard collars are a super simple and effective barrier. You just wrap a piece of cardboard around the stem at the soil level,
Ooh.
like a little protective shield.
Yeah, precisely. Even old toilet paper tubes cut into sections work great.
So that's a good tip.
Then there's diatomaceous earth. You can sprinkle that around the base of your plants on dry evenings. It's abrasive to their soft bodies.
Okay, and how about those beneficial nematodes? I've heard those can be really effective for soil-dwelling pests.
They're fantastic. They basically parasitize the cutworm larvae in the soil.
Wow, so they're like our little underground army.
Exactly. And you water them in, which is great.
And of course, there's always the option of going out at night and hand-picking them.
If you're feeling brave,
Yeah, I think I'll stick with the nematodes and the cardboard collars.
probably a good idea. So when it comes to cutworms, think DIY collars for new transplants, and nematodes, especially if your soil is damp.
Got it. And what about that idea that cutworms only attack weak plants? Is there any truth to that?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Just like with aphids, they'll happily go after healthy seedlings too. They're equal opportunity destroyers. So no room for complacency there. And a pro tip here from our sources. Combine those collars with healthy compost to really give your seedlings the best chance.
I love that. Prevention plus resilience.
Exactly. All right, now onto the carrot rust fly. It's like the undercover agent of the garden. You don't even know it's there until it's already done its damage.
The damage is all underground, right? So frustrating.
It is. And it's not just carrots they target. Parsley too.
Yep. Parsley's definitely on the menu for carrot rust flies.
So prevention is really the name of the game here.
It is. Once those larvae are in the roots, there's not much you can do. So we need to focus on stopping those adult flies from laying their eggs near our plants.
Okay, so how do we do that? What are our organic options?
Row covers, always a good friend. They create that physical barrier, and the flies can't get through to lay their eggs.
Okay, row covers. Check. What else?
Companion planting. Planting strong-smelling things like onions or garlic nearby, that can really confuse the flies and make it harder for them to find their target plants.
So it's like creating a camouflage shield with scent.
I like that. It's exactly what we're doing. And of course, crop rotation is essential. Don't plant carrots or parsley in the same spot year after year.
Right. Don't make it easy for them.
Exactly. And then those beneficial nematodes can also be applied to the soil in early spring as a preventative measure.
Okay, so to sum it all up, our carrot rust fly prevention plan is cover those crops ASAP with row covers, companion plant with garlic or chives, and rotate our crops every year.
You got it.
And a couple of extra tips from our sources. Avoid thinning carrots on sunny days. Apparently, that releases a scent that attracts the flies.
And if you can, try planting resistant varieties like flyaway carrots.
Oh, interesting. So it's about disrupting their habits with smart planting and physical barriers.
Precisely. Now, last but certainly not least, we have the slugs. Those slimy nighttime munchers that just love to feast on our hostas and lettuce.
Oh, the slugs. They're persistent little creatures, aren't they?
They are, and they can do a lot of damage overnight. You know, those ragged holes, silvery trails.
Yeah, a pretty sight. So where do we usually find these guys hiding out during the day?
Check those damp, shady spots. Underpots, rocks, thick mulch. That's where they like to hang out.
Got it. So once we've located our slimy adversaries, how do we get rid of them? Organically, of course.
Well, beer traps are a classic for a reason. They work.
Yeah, I've heard about those. You just bury a container filled with beer and they crawl in and drown, right?
Exactly. It's best for smaller gardens, though. And then copper tape creates a barrier that slugs don't like to cross.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that can be useful for protecting raised beds or individual pots.
Okay, so copper tape, interesting.
And diatomaceous earth, remember that. Sprinkle that around on dry nights, it'll dehydrate them.
Right. And of course, there's always the option of a late night slug hunt.
If you're up for it.
I think I'll leave that one to the braver souls out there. So, our slug control plan.
Beer traps, rinning plants with things like crushed eggshells or coffee grounds. Slugs don't like crawling over rough textures.
Ooh, smart. And for prevention.
Water in the morning, let that soil surface dry out during the day, and avoid thick mulch early on.
Okay, so keeping things a bit drier. And one more thing about slugs. I know some people swear by salt, but our sources advise against it.
Yeah, salt can harm your soil and plants.
Right, so beer traps are the kinder, gentler, and more environmentally friendly option.
Definitely. And a pro tip here, if your plants have been hit by slugs, pair your slug control with some extra seedling nutrition to help them recover.
Love that. Okay, so we've covered all those individual pests, but now let's talk about the bigger picture. How do we create a garden that's just naturally resistant to pests?
This is where it gets really interesting. We're talking about creating a whole garden environment where pests are less likely to thrive in the first place.
Our sources use this great analogy of a fortress. Strong plants are the walls, beneficial insects are our allies, and traps are like our early warning system.
I love that. So let's break down the top 5 organic prevention tactics.
Lay it on me.
First up, companion planting. strategically planting things together because they either repel pests or attract beneficial insects.
So it's about understanding those plant relationships.
Exactly. Second, healthy soil. Healthy soil equals healthy plants, which are much better at withstanding pest pressure.
So it all starts with the soil.
It really does. Number 3, diversity. Mix things up. Don't plant large blocks of the same crop. It just makes it too easy for pests.
Right. Keep them guessing.
Exactly. Number 4, actively attract those beneficial insects. Ladybugs, lacewings, parasitic wasps. They're our pest control squad.
I like that, our little army of helpers.
Precisely. And finally, row covers. Yes, they take a bit more effort, but they're incredibly effective at physically blocking pests.
So what does a typical day or week look like in a pest-resistant garden? What's the routine?
Well, start each day with a little garden patrol. Just a quick walkthrough, checking for any signs of trouble, especially on new growth.
So a mindful moment with our plants.
Exactly. And then, companion planting. The sources mention planting marigolds with tomatoes, basil near squash.
Okay, specific pairings. Got it.
And then a weekly application of compost tea to your soil.
Giving our soil a little TLC.
Exactly. And, a couple more pro tips. Dill, yarrow, sunflowers, those are all great for attracting beneficial insects. Make crop rotation a habit. And be mindful of how you use mulch. Things like straw or leaf mulch are better than thick layers of wood chips.
Okay, so lots of little things we can do to make a big difference. What about those moments when, despite our best efforts, we miss something? Any quick fixes?
Absolutely. If you forget to rotate your crops, a sprinkle of cinnamon on the soil can help.
Cinnamon.
Yep. It has antifungal properties, and it deters some pests. And if your seedlings are looking a bit sad, a little seedling fertilizer can give them a boost.
Okay. And for those times when you're just overwhelmed by pests, what's the emergency response?
Beneficial nematodes. They can really help to get a handle on those soil-dwelling pests quickly.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So it's all about balance, right? Building that healthy garden ecosystem.
100%. Healthy soil, diversity, patience. Those are the keys.
Love it. So to wrap things up, the main message here is that early detection and organic methods, they're essential for a thriving garden.
They really are. And, it's about empowering you, the listener, to take control of your garden in a way that's safe for you, your family, and the environment.
Our sources even have this handy March pest control checklist, daily dawn patrols, weekly soil checks, companion planting, and keeping a gardening journal to track your progress.
And remember, gardening is a journey. It's about those small victories. Celebrate them. Connect with other gardeners. Share your tips and tricks.
It's a community.
It is.
And you know what really resonated with me from our sources? Gardening isn't about perfection. It's about progress.
I love that. Enjoy the process, learn as you go, and don't be afraid to experiment. So true. And now for our final thought for this week. As you look at your own garden, which of these early season pests do you think might be the biggest challenge for you? And what are some of those preventative steps you can start taking right now to get ahead of them? Go out there, observe your garden, and see what you discover.
Happy gardening, everyone.